Coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the coach pad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your coach pad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today I have my friend, Coach Kelley Lee. He is the head football coach at Eastern New Mexico University. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you coming back on. Like I said, I think, God, was it 4 years we've known each other now? I think since COVID year.
I believe so. Yeah.
It seems a lot longer than that, but I mean, but it's good. So, the obvious first thing is, obviously you returned since you last spoke to Eastern New Mexico. Kind of how's that transition been for you?
Well, it's been good. New Mexico's our home, for our family, and we have relatives here and family and longtime friends, and love this community here in Portales and the schools. So there was a lot of positives coming back, and it's been a good homecoming.
Good. Now, we've talked, and obviously the standard in college football is not to run a triple or really just any under center offense. I'll just phrase it that way because that's just,
yeah.
Most college offenses are under the center probably less than 15% of the time. And then obviously you were well known for running your variation of the Flexbone triple, however you want to word it. And obviously you left a couple of years, came back. What was kind of that process of you? Because you've had some kids that were familiar with your system, some that weren't. What was that kind of transitioning Eastern back to an under center, offense?
Yeah, I think there was a couple things that helped us. Obviously, it's always challenging, but like you hit on the fact that we had some kids that had played for us, when we were here before, and some kids that we had recruited to play in our system that were still here, so they fit the style of player we were recruited. I think the fact that we had pretty good success here before, and then maybe when they went away for it, they didn't have that kind of success, made it a little bit more easier to sell the transition back to it. Look, we did this and we had this success, and without it, you haven't had the success. So we're going back to what we did before. So I think all of those things helped a little bit, but there are challenges. You're definitely different style of lineman play. Your running backs have to learn to, and your receivers have to block a lot more than they do in other systems, and they got to embrace that. And then you got to find a quarterback or a couple quarterbacks that can distribute the ball and make those snap decisions. And luckily we've got a couple of those guys. So that helped a lot as well.
Okay. And would you say it accelerated the install process compared to like when you took over the first time and then when you went to Texas? Do you think that because you had so many that were still involved or familiar with it, it kind of sped up the install, or just because did you just kind of treat it the same?
No, I think it sped it up. I think we could move at a faster rate. We were a lot better offensively than I anticipated this year. We improved in almost every category, and we were really 1 or 2 in our conference in every statistical category. I think we were second in the nation in rushing and second in pass efficiency. So that's a pretty good combination, and to be able to do that with kids that were learning our system, a lot of them, I was really proud of them. But I think a lot of it had to do with, we had a few guys that had buy-in, and they were the leaders on our team. So the other kids followed them. And then they were great examples when we would do drill work or techniques and install, because you had someone who could do it the right way, and other kids could see that. Because we can talk about it, we can show examples, but even if I get down and demonstrate, I'm not sure I'm demonstrating and it looks right. It probably looks so slow these days. So that we had some kids that were very good that could do that. And I think that helped our other kids learn. So 100%, we were able to move on faster and are farther along in our install moving forward than we would have been without those kids.
Now, just out of curiosity, as you came back, how much had your offense, really had your offense evolved or changed or done anything? Because were you able to like, and the reason I ask that is because, I mean, heck, you might have had a little less restrictions in Texas, to be honest, given athletic periods
Yeah,
and everything, and allowed you to play with probably kind of a little bit more than maybe you could in college, especially after
100%.
doing it.
Yeah,
So,
you're
like,
really set up to succeed in Texas. I haven't coached there a long time ago, but I tell people if you're not having success in Texas, I feel like you don't really know how to run a great offseason. I really believe that. Like you have that much time with your kids. And I know people say this kid's here and there and you know, it's kids, but you get a lot of time to develop it. We basically had an hour of football all year long that we could work. So, you know, we went into the playoffs and couple rounds, we would give them off to Christmas and we would come back and we would start on football an hour a day, 5 days a week, all the way into our spring ball where you got 18 practices through the summer. You got that hour of football. And so you're right. In a lot of ways, we were able to progress really fast and maybe even farther along. I think we would have been farther along there at Brownsville Veterans maybe than we are here. The only thing that was the difference is we, in our situation, had to play a lot of our kids both ways. So then when we're dividing up that practice time as we were building the program, if we had our numbers and enough good players that we would have had a separate offensive defense, I think we might have been farther ahead in high school than we are in college. But because of that, we didn't really get a lot into our gun stuff down there. We stayed pretty much under center. We played with a little bit of gun the second year. The first year was almost exclusively under center. The second year, we were probably 10% of the time in the gun. So we didn't get as much of that as we would have. But if we were in a situation where we could have had a two platoon, we probably would have had more time and been farther along at the high school level.
yeah. Now, I mean, just how do I want to word this? There, I mean, being in Texas and being able to do there, and I know you probably already recruit fairly heavily in Texas as it is, but having that
Yes, sir.
experience and everything, did that alter how you approached? I mean, and obviously the transfer portal has set everything on fire to a point, and with how people approach things. But did that time down there and being able to see certain schools and being familiar now with certain coaches and programs that alter how you approach recruiting at all, or how you recruit just the state of Texas in general?
Yeah, we expanded our recruiting area a little bit down to the valley where I had coached, just because I'd built some relationships with coaches. We signed 4 players this year out of the high school I coached at, which obviously helped. They made it to the semifinals this year. I got out there and they even did much better. So, but that was great. We were able to recruit some of those kids. And, I think though it reaffirmed what we did think about having recruited Texas kids for a long time. So they're going to be very polished. You also know that those Texas kids know how to really go through an off season, because they've been in there since 7th grade, really with varsity coaches going down to their feeder, working with them and grinding and all the way through the summer. So, those kids are going to be able to take a butt chewing, they're going to work. They've had to be dedicated because there's so many kids. If you don't, you wash out. So there's a lot of positives recruiting those kids from that standpoint of just culturally, they're going to be able to come into your program and really work.
Okay. Now, I mean, we've talked practices before and practice schedules, but I don't think we've ever really gotten nitty gritty in some of this stuff. And I mean, I'm just always curious, like, because I've talked to a lot of line coaches for the triple and Flexbone, and obviously line coaches in general, I don't care what offense you're running, are very passionate and different human beings. They just are. But like, as somebody who's ran the Flexbone triple for so long, from a like backfield and quarterback and wings and running back perspective, like, how do you approach the early part of your install? Is it a lot of pods? Is it a lot individual? Is it a lot of just mesh and pitch oriented? How do you approach your initial phase of quarterback, running back, wing atmosphere?
Yeah, for our system over the first 3 days, we're probably going to basically just install midline and triple as far as our run game. We call it the million mesh marathon. We want, a million meshes, so to speak, in those days. So, we're meshing, then we're meshing with the read, then we're doing mesh ball security meshes, and then of course pod drills, and then half line, and then, moving up to team. But we're going to really get it to where we feel like after those few days, the kids should be pretty comfortable. And then obviously as you install, you keep working those things, but we put a big emphasis on there. I don't think the mesh is a scientific deal. I've seen people with great coaching points and deals, but I really think it's like dancing. When you get people together and they dance with each other a lot, they become good dancers together, and you got to do that with your quarterbacks and fullbacks. They got to mesh together, and they got to have a lot of reps at it. And I think, it's like a baseball player being a hitter. They say they need so many thousand hits, and you need so many thousand meshes. And so we do spend a lot of time on that early on.
Okay. Now, I mean, continue with that. So I like, because I like history. I was originally licensed in that before I became a business teacher. And so you look at that perspective, and then I watch various old things. I watch old documentaries and read old books on the wishbone and the flexbone and the early time at Navy. I've had coaches who were with Jim Grove back when he ran the triple, and people that were with Hawaii when they just starting to run their variation of it before a lot of that staff moved to Air Force and Georgia Tech and so forth. And this is where I'm probably not gonna be the nicest human being, but you watch a lot of that old film, and the one thing I noticed that agitates the crap out of me is there's a lot of turnovers. There's a lot of fumbles, a lot of mesh issues, the pitch especially. How do you think, as a option coach, as you've done it as long as you've had, has there anything, why do you think that was such a problem? And two, how do you think you as option coaches have corrected that? Because I look at your stats and I look at other good triple teams in college, and it's not mass turnover city like it was. If anything,
no, we had the fewest in our conference this year.
Yeah.
We were the least turnover team, and part of it goes to the reps. We had 4 fumbles in our first game. You know what I mean? I think we ended up with 8 or 9 on the whole year. So obviously we were still learning, but I always say we're going to fumble in practice because we're going to do so many reps. I think option coaches above maybe any coaches I've been anywhere design things to get reps, because I think we found that you need those reps of taking care of the ball. So, with the pods and the half line and the stuff, we get so many reps that our kids are very comfortable with it, by the time they get into a game. And especially, a quarterback maybe in their second year of playing is, but I think it all comes down to those reps. I think going back to the old days, the pitch paths have been changed with the Flexbone, the mesh point. When they went in the wishbone, it was moving away from the split back veer, right?
Yep.
And those meshes were very close to the reed key. The Flexbone coaches eventually, they moved the mesh in much tighter. And I think that has created helps the quarterback, because you're farther away from the reed key. The splits are still big. There's more time. And I think those things have helped through the years. The other thing that I think has been a big revolution in Flexbone football was the rocket toss, because back in the wishbone days, that was the quick pitch out of the wishbone wasn't as big a threat. You were short a blocker, and you got a lot of pull pitch stunts, which pull pitch stunts, we still work them, and you have to, because they're the most challenging thing a quarterback has to deal with. But I mean, we'll go a year and our quarterbacks are going to be in pull pitch situations 5 to 10 times the whole season, because if someone's putting you in a pull pitch situation and you have the rocket toss called, you're on the perimeter right now and it's a big play. So that's really detoured people from doing that. It's almost a gamble when they do. So I think that's helped the turnover situation a lot, is the ability just to run that out of the Flexbone, toss it out to that phase, and not worry about having to pitch it to get that guy the ball.
Yeah, I was just curious because I've never asked an option coach that. I've watched more wishbone and split back, and this offseason just watching documentaries and old film, and I'm just like, it just drives me insane, because we pride ourselves. I think we had less than 4 fumbles on the entire year this year. I really emphasize, we start practice every day with a ball security thing. We rotate between different ball security drills, and I really focus on jabbing on the ball as the kids go down, because that's typically, if you look at studies, that's the most common spot a fumble happens, is as they're going to the ground. So again, you know as well as I do, that's a difference between probably winning or losing some games throughout the year.
And I think, I think whether it's slot T, wing T, any kind of option football, I think naturally the way you're practicing, there's more contact, right? So I think I always think that sometimes people fumble because they're not used to contact. And when you're not used to contact in practice, it doesn't matter how many ball security drills you have. If you're not used to it, you're not being mindful of it. But the nature of those offenses forces ball carriers to protect the ball because you're going to do a lot of inside run. You're going to be in tight areas. They're going to get banged into. Even when you're not going live, you're just going thud. It forces your kids to really be mindful about their ball security. So I think the nature of those offenses help with ball security as well.
Okay. Now you mentioned pull pitch stunts there, obviously, to try to just get you to pitch the ball right now. And how do you, what does looking like prepping that in a practice, and then for an option coach, you probably see it less than a high school coach does. I think a high school coach, just because of the nature of what you can do compared to maybe a high school team might be able to do. How often do you work it in a week or a given couple weeks, and then kind of what does that kind of look like?
Well, when we're installing, we'll do a drill where they're just doing it, and they got to learn to disconnect from the mesh early, not step, drop their hips and pitch. Most quarterbacks will get in trouble when they continue off the mesh like it's a normal. We tell those guys once they've dedicated, once they've turned and committed, let's get rid of the ball, get it out of your hands. So we'll do drills early, but then we just make sure when we hit our pods and our half line, mostly in our pods, that we're going to get a couple pull pitches, each time, and then we're going to surprise them once or twice during half line with that situation so they're ready to handle it.
Yeah, like I said, I think I know some defense coordinators that will just sell out to make the pitch because they view it as the least threatening athlete or the most high risk thing. I know others that will try to show you 18 different looks, and as I do, doing too much, it's that you're not used to kind of leads to a failure. You still, I'll ask you one other major question before we kind of get to some of the end stuff. Like from your time, I'm assuming there's probably some turnover in your conference since the last time you were there. I haven't checked the coaches, but
there's been a little bit, yeah.
There's always a little bit. We all know this because not everybody wins enough every year it's just the nature of our game, or they get promoted and get other jobs, whatever. But you probably had some semblance of an idea of how your league would defend your offense coming back. Was it a lot of what you expected, or was there a lot more adaptation or change since last time? Because obviously it didn't work as well as they thought it did, because when you're first or second rushing, second in passing efficiency, fewest in turnovers, obviously you're doing your stuff the way you need to do it. But did you kind of, as you came back, give you what you thought, or did you have to, and I know your practice sets up for handle everything, but or did you see some wrinkles that maybe you hadn't seen in a while?
The teams that we feel like have a good idea of how to defend us, we continue to get what we've got before. They've had lots of years. Every year they tweak it, and if we get them on something, they're going to make an adjustment to cover that aspect. So from that standpoint, we got a little bit with those guys what we thought. With some of the other teams, we really had no idea, with the ones that had changed. So, it's one of those where we just work on ourselves that week and try to prepare for everything. But yeah, we got a little bit of what we expected from the familiar folks.
Okay. Now, I know you pride yourself on still being able to throw the ball in what you do. It's a good selling point for quarterbacks and receivers and skill kids and all that. And,
yeah.
And like I said, I think a little over 1,000 yards on 100 attempts. I think it was.
Yeah, we had the leading receiver in the conference in terms of not catches, but yards, touchdowns, yards per catch. He was a redshirt freshman. Unfortunately, that draws a lot of attention. Now he's going to be playing in Coastal Carolina. But I think it says something though. That's a kid who they were in a pro style offense and redshirted. They couldn't get him on the field. But his skill set fit what we needed to do. We throw the ball deep to those wideouts. He was a good deep throw. We have a limited pass tree. He could run the routes we ask him, and because of the commitment to stop the run, he was able to be very successful and was actually the freshman of the year in our conference. So we always have taken pride of that. When I was down at Brownsville, Rio Grande Valley, there's about 40 schools, 4A to 6A, all within about an hour of each other. And we had the leading receiver in the valley caught 16 touchdown passes with us, so we feel like that's one of the biggest threats is people sell out to stop the run. You get one-on-one, and if you have a quarterback that can throw it and a guy that can catch it, you'd be silly not to take advantage of that. With us, it always really comes back to, do we feel like we can protect it? We feel like we can execute in the passing game because people aren't playing their optimal coverages against us. They're not at their best pass defense when they play us. And so it really comes down to, can we protect, and if we can, we've got opportunities there. So that helped a lot to have a guy that could throw the ball this year and one that could catch it.
Oh yeah. And like it just makes it better for recruiting for you guys, obviously. Like, hey, we're producing quality talent here. And now you mentioned it's one-on-one. Like, how much of it is we have a really good dude, we're one-on-one, and how much of it is he's good and we have a good play action game because we're running the ball so well? Or do you think it's kind of a combination of both? Because obviously you run what you run passing wise, like you'll adapt a little bit here and there, but like you're gonna run your stuff. How much is that the player versus the scheme versus the other part of the scheme that's getting the play action open?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, obviously. Our scheme is going to allow a receiver to get open. You know what I mean? That's just tried and true. We know that through years of running it. We've had an all-conference receiver just about every year. But we feel like because of our scheme that we have a track record, we can show receivers, look, this is what our offense produces for receivers. And they can see the tape, it's funny because we recruit against people and we had a team and they're telling us, you don't want to go there to throw. And I said, wait, let's look at the stats. They threw it 170 more times than we did for 100 more yards. So I said, for us to be as bad at throwing the ball as they are, we would have to go out, throw 170 passes, complete 20 of them for 1 touchdown and 100 yards. And that would be half of the season of passing the ball. So I said, before they tell you that you shouldn't come here, let's look at the stat. Let's get down to the reality of it. Yeah. And because we've had good players, then we can attract good players at that position. So then it always becomes kind of a combination of both things. And obviously our young man did a good job and it worked out for him. And we got another kid that started last year, our other receiver right now, who started as a freshman opposite him, and he's looking fantastic in spring ball. And we think we got another guy ready to roll. We've been able to recruit some really good ones, but we know that we're going to give you the opportunity. And what we say is, look, you're probably going to get just as many targets as you do in any offense if you're one of our 2 starting receivers. The only difference is on the targets you're not at, instead of running off, you actually get to go hit somebody, right? So you get a block. It's really the only difference. You're going to get 6 or 7 targets. You're going to catch 4 or 5 balls, and the rest of the time you're going to block instead of running go routes for slot receivers. And, I think that's, you look at the stats and it's true. Even some of the teams that really throw the ball well in our league, it's spread out among so many receivers. Their stats, they have more catches, but they don't have more yards. They don't have more touchdowns, right? So, and that's something we have to explain in the recruiting process because there's a lot of negative recruiting to our system. And then there's just ignorance. Other people, maybe an uncle or a friend, you don't want to go there. And then sometimes it's the kids we're recruiting saying, no, look at this. Look, this is why I want to go there, So that's a battle we fight, but one that we've been able to successfully navigate pretty well.
Well, it's the perceptions that people still think of 1990s or early 2000s Flexbone before the explosion of just role changes and adaptations and all that. Like I said, you've thrown the ball well. I think most college teams that run the triple well or throw the ball at a fairly high rate in general. Like they're efficient.
Yeah, very efficient. Yeah.
Like you're not going to throw the ball 200 times like some of the other schools, but you're going to throw maybe 100 for just as many yards, or as you kind of point out, get an all-league receiver, or finish second at pass efficiency, which is a highly underrated category. I think efficiency has become probably a overly used word lately, but it's an accurate word. Like you want to be an efficient offense. You want to get 4+ yards on first down. You want to get half on or more on second down. Like it's all about okay, how can we optimize our time? One of my last questions for you is how, I mean, everything evolves, everything adapts. I know, I mean, like you look at high school and college Flexbone teams, it's a lot more zone dive, it's a lot more mid triple than it had been in the past. Kind of gotten away from, at least this is my perception, talking to high school and college guys, getting away from outside veer. A lot more true. If you're going to run veer, it's going to be mostly inside.
Yeah.
How do you think your world has changed in terms of scheme or adapted? Have you noticed, at least for you, any major trends on, hey, we're doing a lot more of this, we need to invest more time in this, we're doing a lot less of this?
Yeah, we've never been a big outside veer team, so that was never a big part of what we did. We've always run the inside veer, and we still run the old-fashioned triple. But I mean, we've run the mid triple for a long time, and some years we run mid triple more. Sometimes we run regular triple more. Just kind of depends on what our quarterbacks read better from year to year. We try to make sure, we're putting them in the optimal situations. And obviously we run the zone dive and those things. And I think each year your team's going to take on an identity based on maybe your personnel. I think that's one of the great things of the Flexbone is there is enough flexibility in there to emphasize this part of the offense or this complementary play from year to year. So the biggest challenge we've had in adapting has been the new cut rules, which I had always, having coached New Mexico football and run this offense, I was already kind of used to it. We had a lot of success doing that. And then, in college, you could cut more. When I went to Texas, we still had the cut rules. And then Texas followed the NCAA and changed them. So the good thing about being in college is we can recruit different now. So we recruit bigger slot running backs than we had in the past. So you change your play calling, change a little bit of the way you recruit, you know what I mean? And we try to switch and crack and stuff more than we did when we could just go out and cut on the perimeter. So give our guys angles and some things like that. But there's enough flexibility in the offense. You can still run it at high level. Obviously, Harding proved that this year, winning a national championship. We installing it, pretty fresh. We're second and first in our conference in every category. So, I don't think the cut rules have changed the fact that you can't execute this offense at our level. And I knew that already because I'd run it at high school and really successful without being able to cut. So, I think there's a lot of myths, but it does change what you emphasize in your offense and maybe how you attack the perimeter, how you handle things. Double option might be better sometimes than triple option now and things. But that's probably the biggest thing that we've had to navigate over the last 2 years.
Now, I mean, my last question, obviously with the popularity or emphasis of seeing you, Harding, Friends, Air Force, and there's like a couple other colleges going back to it like full time. I mean, high school coaches, I'm assuming, are probably like, oh, okay. Like, and now you have places like, hey, Eastern won XY amount of games. Harding won national title. Air Force won, I think, 10 games this year. Like, hey, you win with this offense. Like, do you have any, like, little, like, because we talked about every year it's a little different on the answer, but I always like to ask it anyways. Any, like, food for thought, suggestions, recommendations? Obviously, they can look back on your stuff with me on here. They can look on CoachTube. You have plenty of resources there. I know you have a clinic coming up. There's a billion different resources for your variation of it and just variations in general. But any food for thought or kind of ideas or maybe reflections based off being in Texas for 2 years and then coming back to college and your first year back of just kind of installing and running the triple-based offense?
Yeah, the one thing I noticed when I was coaching high school ball last 2 years, there's a lot of coaches would rather run the spread than win. I mean, and when we would defend them, I would tell our DC, if they can't run 4 verticals and hit every single receiver, and if they can't hit the widest guy in trips on an 18-yard comeback, we're not going to defend that stuff. We're going to make their life really miserable. You got to have a quarterback that can make those throws. And if you can, it's a great offense. And you better have 2 of them in case the other one gets hurt. But a lot of them don't. And they're just, to me, they're putting their kids in tough situations. So, I think there's definitely like you said, there's a lot of high school programs that need to run the option, wing tee, slot tee, down in Texas, they run the slot tee. That thing's nasty, But for me, if you're going to that, the advice I would have through my career is don't be dogmatic about it. Don't go to Eastern New Mexico and say, we're going to run the ground strike and we're going to do everything Coach Lee says, or go see Coach Wheaton at Harding and say, we're going to do the Harding, or Air Force. Everybody's a little bit different. Go visit clinic with multiple people. You might have one person you rely on, or one you're adapting or you're modeling to get started, but learn from all of it and fit it to what you want to do, because in the end, you're going to call the plays. You know what I mean? And how you want to attack and how you think of things, your offense better match what you want to do, match the personnel you need to get the ball in. And it's a great thing about the Flexbone. You can do that. You know what I mean? You can do it, but everybody does a little bit different, and visit lots of different people, because none of them are bad. Everybody that's doing this at a high level is really good. But the way they might do it really good might not fit you. The way we do it might not be best for you. You know what I mean? The way Harding does it might not be best for you. But, if you visit them, you watch their stuff, you watch our stuff, you study Air Force, you study old Paul Johnson or Navy or Army, you're going to get an idea of what everyone's doing and how they're trying to accomplish the same thing through different ways. And you can kind of build an offense around your identity and what kind of kids you have in your program. Because we can do what we want, because we can go recruit our guys. I know how I want to run my offense. I can recruit those guys. Harding knows what they want. They can recruit those guys. High school, you have what you have, and you better be able to adjust it. So I would say not get too dogmatic in one phase or the other, or one style of the Flexbone or the other.
Okay. Well, coaches, check out the links below. You'll have stuff to his coach too, prior videos with me, all that lovely jazz. Like, share, subscribe as usual. I'm probably forgetting something, but oh well. Follow us on Twitter. All that lovely stuff. Otherwise, that is in our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.
Appreciate you, Nick.